Let's try and understand how the discussions are going to be framed. COP21 at the end of this year, but beyond COP21. Because we must sure that something will happen following the Kyoto Protocol, and we're going to change perspective. No longer caps or quotas will be negotiated, but announcements will be made. INDC's intended nationally determined contributions, the contributions that will be made by countries, or rather that they will propose to make in order to decrease emissions. These measures and provisions are not going to place humankind on the necessary trajectory to meet the 2% objective. So what international agreement could trigger enough cooperation in order to encourage all countries to commit themselves on more ambitious policies so that we can come closer to the 2-degree objective? The question you're probably asking yourself is whether these INDC announcements are binding, legally binding or not. We should be careful not to make any mistakes because things would be more difficult. Can we reconcile a commitment on measures which are binding in each national jurisdiction, because the countries will not accept this authority. So we're stuck, we can do nothing. Yes, we can. There are two options. We can take binding commitments, because when we take a binding commitment, then it becomes a law in our national jurisdiction. This would already be a step forward. And the third option, which is compatible with the other one, would be to find mechanisms, the benefits of which will be shared by all, and those who have not played ball, have not complied to their commitments, would not share the benefits. Because we cannot simply decree that the objective of 2 degrees will be met if nothing is done on the national level. The mechanism must be felt by all, the results must be tangible and seen by all, so that people in the coming years ask that the mechanisms be reinforced rather than the contrary. But the question remains how to fund the system. We must understand that a lot remains to be done with the IPCC, and studies are carried out showing that additional investments, what we need to pay for the low-carbon transition, only represents 0.5 to 1% of GDP, of our country's GDP, for non-OPEC countries for the next 20 years. So we would not need to sacrifice the interests of the current generations to protect the wealth of the future generations, simply because the overcost due to low-carbon energies would be compensated for by the fact that we would decrease the energy demand. So we lose on the offer, but we gain on the demand. So macroeconomically, it would be feasible, but it won't be that easy. We need to reorient our investments, and this would impact 8 to 10% of the fixed equity generation. Now, I'm not saying that there is not a global need for funding. I'm simply saying that we need to find mechanisms to reorient the savings towards low-carbon investments. This mechanism might even interest people whose priority is not the climate, but people who are interested by the economic policies needed nowadays to help our countries emerge from this economic crisis that we're going through. On the one hand, we have very strong savings, and on the other hand, the trend to the reluctance to invest the saving in companies which are managed only on the basis of the share price on a daily basis rather than for the next 20 years. Long-term investments are therefore discouraged from investing on this kind of company. This is a huge stake for all of the global economy. Using the low-carbon transition as a way to solve the contradiction between savings and the reluctance to invest on short-term production systems. The Green Carbon Fund is based on public funding in a situation where public debts are too high, although we're trying to mitigate them. And we understand that we will be able to reorient the necessary funds if we can convince private investors and get the available private savings. But there is a danger for this type of investment, and for people to invest, they must have the feeling that their investment would not be risky. So, for the same quantity of energy produced or saved, more immediate expenses are needed. This can only be achieved if the system will decrease the demand for investment, and also by working on financial intermediation systems, whereby your savings, my savings, will be managed by systems, will no longer be managed by systems, would take a long time to transform a saving in productive investment. And this is the reason for the current crisis. Very often, savings are oriented towards real estate investments and more productive investment, speculation. COP21, therefore, is not there to set up such a system. There are other dimensions than national governance involved. But COP21 could pave the way by finding systems to monitor this type of investment, and by opening a discussion on the carbon value, so that the investments would match the carbon value. The low carbon transition may start a virtuous circle in a world economy that is undergoing a crisis, orienting the saving towards infrastructure investments rather than speculative investments. The Climate Convention can at least pave the way so that future evolutions of what is going to happen outside of the international governance, that is finance, monetary issues, trade and intellectual property rights, are better addressed. In terms of responsibility, such an evolution concerns all the countries across the world. We have a common but differentiated responsibility to bear, and this is going to have an impact on the climate, but also on our financial situation. On the short term, thanks to initiatives taken in European countries, in Japan and in the United States, problems will be addressed. Our countries have a responsibility to bear, and therefore it is also their job to make proposals which we know will be adopted in all likelihood by emerging countries, because they are facing the same problems that we are facing, finding a way to get hold of private savings, the kind of savings that are not well used today.